November 27th, 2005. And let's see. Well, just for the camera, I'm Jessica Crawford, and you are?
Carroll T. Allen.
So,
normally called Tom.
So we'll go ahead and start the interview. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted.
Yeah. How old were you when you went into the service?
17.
Yeah, wow, 17. Where were you living when you enlisted in the service?
Well, basically at home. I was working part-time in a glass factory, but I was basically living at home.
Yeah. Why did you enlist in the service?
Well, I was anxious to do my part in the defense of the country.
Yeah. Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
Well, that's a little bit involved story because I was determined when I was 16, when the war first started, to be a fighter pilot.
Uh-huh.
And I tried my best to pass the physical exam into the Naval Air Force.
Yeah.
And was unable to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So then, failing that, I attempted to enlist in several other services, and again I was rejected because of this same physical problem.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them told me that one of the recruit officers at the service, I think it was probably the Navy, said that I was badly needed in the U.S. Merchant Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And suggested I go to the recruiter there, which I did. Well, they almost immediately accepted me.
Yeah.
And that's how I enlisted in the Merchant Marine.
Okay. Do you recall your first days when you enlisted?
Oh, yes.
What you did?
Yes. Well, we went to the boot camp by railroad.
Mm-hmm.
From St. Louis. I left from St. Louis and went to Sheepshead Bay. Should I be talking to the camera?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay. And went to Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, New York,
mm-hmm.
to the training facility there.
Mm-hmm.
The training facility of the U.S. Maritime Service, which was a training facility for the Merchant Marine.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I remember there is the smell of salt water, which I had never smelled before in my life.
Uh-huh.
And then the next few days were filled with things like getting all my hair cut off and trying to find some clothes that fit in the way of a uniform, and being assigned a barracks and a bunk, and all that kind of thing, which seemed like it went on forever, but didn't, of course.
Yeah. What was your training, like your boot camp experience?
Well, we were trained in all the phases of serving in the Merchant Marine, which included boat drills, abandoned ship type drills, gun training on the cannon and 20mm cannon, and all kinds of survival training. We did things like jumping off 40-foot towers, in imitation of jumping over the side of a ship, and trying to avoid hitting other people that are going just before you, and that kind of thing.
Wow, 40-foot jump.
And then we had regular survival courses that we went through.
Yeah.
The goodie of like a boot camp anywhere would have.
Yeah. Do you remember your instructors at boot camp?
Not really. I remember some of their physical characteristics, but if I saw them again, I wouldn't know them.
Yeah. How'd you get through boot camp, like first starting off in the service like that?
Well, it was pretty much a shock, everything, but after the first week or so, I adapted it to the routine, or if you can call it routine. And we went to bed about 9 o'clock at night and got up about 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and
yeah,
did all kinds of things that I had never done before, like polish the floors and,
yeah,
and all that kind of good stuff.
yeah. Now, which wars or war did you serve in?
World War II.
Mm-hmm. When you were in World War II, like, where did you go during your...
The trips?
Yeah.
Well, I made, I guess it would be 5 trips. They would have included to the Admiralty Islands in the South Pacific, New Guinea, Philippines, eventually to China, Formosa, and then the Aleutian Islands off the north coast of the country. And I guess that's about all of the different places that I went.
It's a lot of places.
Yes, it was. And each visit was with a new mission, you might say, delivery of cargo.
When you arrived, like, at your first destination, what was that like?
Well, it was an island, a small, relatively small island in the South Pacific, about, I would guess now, this is a guess, but I would say 150 miles from New Guinea. And the Admiralty Islands were at that time a major naval base, and the group of ships that I was on had towed sections of a dry dock so that ships in the Pacific, naval ships, would have a place to be repaired. Up to that time, there was no such place. They had to come all the way back to the United States, or at least to Hawaii, in order to do that, which was very time-consuming and so on. But this dry dock, once it was together, it floated. It was made of cement. It was huge.
Yeah.
And you could put up to a cruiser in this thing.
Yeah.
And the island itself, it was pretty primitive at that time, but they had a lot of armed forces there, our armed forces, at that time, of course.
What was like your personal job that you needed to do?
Well, I was trained to be a radio officer, a communications officer, on the various ships that I served on, and I went to a specialized school to do that, out of boot camp. I don't know how much more you want to know about that, but I could.
Well, if you want to elaborate on that.
Well, towards the end of boot camp, which was lasted the better part of 2 months, they offered everyone the opportunity to go to specialized schools out of boot camp. And I considered going into cadet training at Kings Point in New York. But that amounted to going to school for the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah. Which I wasn't keen to do. I wanted to get in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to, another opportunity was to take radio communications training. And so I took an entrance exam and did an aptitude test to see if I could learn Morse code, which of course I did not know at that time. And I passed all those, and so I decided to do that.
Okay, that's cool.
And then we went from there to Huntington, Long Island, to the preliminary school for that. We were there for about 2 months, and then we went to Gallops Island in Boston, which is a little island out in the middle of the harbor. Yeah. And took advanced radio training there. Learned how to repair them and all that kind of thing, electronics training. Yeah. And that went on for about 4 months.
Yeah, wow, 4 months.
So I graduated from that training and was ready to start going to sea then in about March of 1944.
Okay. While you were over doing during the war, did you see any actual combat?
I saw some, but our ship was not actually engaged in any.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all around me when we were delivering ammunition to the Philippines.
Uh-huh.
We were anchored just off the shore, and you could see, I mean, the Japs bombed numerous ships in the harbor area, and then our men were just about maybe 500 yards
Yeah.
over on the beach
Uh-huh.
fighting.
Yeah.
And so it was, I saw some, but we weren't involved in it, I'm happy to say.
Yeah. What were a couple of your most memorable experiences over there? Or one
Well,
in particular?
the experience of tugging those dry dock sections for some between 40 and 50 days,
Mm-hmm.
which is a long time to be at sea and moving in a war zone, moving at about 3 knots, which is very slow.
Yeah.
You're really just a sitting duck.
Yeah.
For any submarine attack or anything like that. But anyway, the experience of moving them all the way down to the Admiralty Islands, I certainly will never forget.
Yeah.
The next, probably most memorable experience was, well, the action in the Philippines, the actual observance of moving ammunition from our ship to the men ashore that were using it.
Yeah.
Certainly was an experience I'll never forget either. Then we were in a couple of storms during various ships, which
Uh-huh.
were rather noteworthy. They were pretty severe.
Really?
And I guess that about covers the most memorable experiences.
Were you awarded any medals or citations while you were?
Well, I don't know that I would call them medals or citations. I got service ribbons,
Uh-huh.
which, in effect say that I served in various war zones
Uh-huh.
and in the liberation of the Philippine Islands.
Mm-hmm. While you were there, how did you stay in touch with your family? Did you write letters?
I wrote letters, yeah, and we got delivery of mail occasionally,
Uh-huh.
like every few weeks maybe,
Yeah.
depending on where we were.
So was the delivery slow? Getting
Very slow.
very slow.
But I did get mail.
Uh-huh.
And I think most everyone got mail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the food like while you were over there?
On the ships, it was, I thought, excellent.
Really?
Yes, I was very happy with the food for the most part. It was nothing fancy about it, but it was good.
Yeah.
And on a ship, you don't have that much to take away from the quality of the food.
Yeah. Yeah. So you always had enough food. There was never a
Yes.
problem with that.
No, that was never a problem.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, since you were basically on a supply ship, I'm assuming you always had plenty of supplies.
That's right.
And
Well,
never...
of course, the supplies we were carrying were all military. They weren't
Uh-huh.
edible by any means. But,
Yeah.
But the ships were well stocked before we left.
Yeah.
And they had refrigeration, and so
Yeah.
there was no hindrance to having decent meals
Uh-huh.
during the voyages.
Yeah. Was there a lot of, like, pressure and stress while you were trying to get your mission done?
Well, at various times there certainly was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We were carrying 11,000 tons of ammunition, and I saw ships at a distance hit with torpedoes that just went up in one big flash.
Yeah.
And those were carrying similar type cargo. And so when you see something like that, it tends to generate a little tension, yes.
Yeah. Was there anything you did for, like, good luck before you would, or something you would think of?
No, I don't recall that there was.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
You were on the ship for a long time, like while you were moving the docks.
Well, the way the Merchant Marine and the Maritime Service, which operated the ships, the Maritime Commission, you would be assigned to a ship.
Mhm.
Then, when it came back from the voyage, whatever that was, then you would usually have the opportunity of staying if you wanted to.
Uh-huh.
If you didn't, then you were reassigned to another ship.
Uh-huh.
And in between times, you had to shift for yourself.
Uh-huh.
There was no assistance in doing that of any kind.
Yeah.
So it was like a series of, in effect, jobs, if you try to compare it to civilian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you guys entertain yourselves while you were?
Well, I think most everybody played a lot of cards. They did a lot of reading, of course, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And sit around and talk and tell lies, I suppose.
Were there any entertainers or anything?
No.
Like, did you ever see any of that type stuff?
No, we were almost never ashore.
Oh,
we were
yeah.
always at sea.
Uh-huh.
But occasionally, when we got to shore, there might be a USO show. It seems to me on one occasion in the Philippines we did see part of the USO show.
Mhm. What did you do when you were like on leave? Was there ever a time when you had free time, like to go do something other than?
You mean off the ship?
Uh-huh. Was there ever a time?
Leave?
Uh-huh. Was there ever a time when you had that?
Well, like I said, we didn't receive leave in the sense that so many days per unit of time served, like the military did, at least to some degree. We had time in between voyages, in which time you could do pretty much as you pleased. And so most everybody did that, and many, probably most, went home if they could, if they had enough time and had the money. They would go home.
Yeah.
And between voyages.
Did you ever go home?
I did once. Yeah.
How old were you when you went home?
Well,
Were you still?
I would have been, by that time, I would have probably been 19.
19?
Yeah.
So 2 years had passed by then?
Well, yeah, I think so. I went home at Christmas, I remember, and I'm trying to remember what Christmas it was. I think it was probably when I was 18 still. Well, my birthday's in November. Well, I don't know, I'd have to figure that out.
Okay.
It was about the first Christmas it worked out that I did get to go home after I was out of training.
Yeah.
So that would have been 1944. Christmas of 1944, I think.
Okay. Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual things that happened?
Well, a lot of small stuff, but probably the most humorous thing that happened on the ships were when we crossed the equator the first time. We had a ceremony, they called it, where they threatened to what they called keel haul all of the people who had never crossed the equator. Now, keel hauling is an old term from way back in the sailing boat days, where they would tie a rope to a man's ankles and one to his wrists and circle the ship with him.
Oh, yeah.
Put her down underneath the ship and up on the other side. And usually that was a pretty painful experience because the ships rapidly became covered with barnacles, and barnacles are very rough and very sharp. And of course they didn't do that on any ships I was on, but they threatened to do it.
Yeah.
You know, this is all part of the, you might say, initiation. And it was both entertaining and I guess kind of exciting. That was probably the most humorous thing that happened. that I can think of offhand anyway.
Even though I know this isn't humorous, I remember you telling the story about your appendix, like when you first went over.
Yeah.
What was the whole story with that?
Well, let's see, that would have been in 1945 in the Philippines, and I had been feeling bad like for a day or so, and then we left port. I forget now. I think our destination was probably back to the Philippines, some other part of the island. We picked up cargo in one place and moved it to others and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we hadn't any more cleared port until I was desperately ill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just so bad I couldn't hardly stand it.
Yeah.
And so they turned around and went back and anchored and took me ashore.
Really?
And this was about 2 o'clock in the morning.
And,
I laid in an Army field hospital and the rest of the night, continually ill. And then early the next morning, a little Filipino doctor operated on me for appendicitis.
Yeah.
And they didn't succeed in getting it out before it burst. So I spent the next, as a result, I had a terrible infection in my abdomen. And I spent the next, I forget exactly, but it's pretty close to a month in the hospital, there in that field hospital.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my ship went on. And by the time I was finally discharged out of the hospital, the only thing that saved my life there, I think, was the advent of penicillin, which was just something that was new at that time. They gave me shots of penicillin about every 2 hours, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And finally I got the infection under control. Well, anyway, by the time I was discharged from the hospital, my ship was in Formosa at that particular point in time, and so I flew there and rejoined the ship.
Oh, okay. They didn't just send you on with the next ship or anything? They flew you over to your original?
I went to the ship that I had been on, had discharged, had taken me ashore, yeah.
Did you guys play any pranks on each other while you were over there?
Oh, sure, but nothing really dramatic. Probably the most dramatic was in training school, where we would, every once in a while, what they call a short sheet. You'd probably still have done it.
Yeah.
We would short sheet other people. You know how that works.
Yeah.
And we got a big kick out of that, of course. And then there's a lot of little stuff, but that was probably the major prank to play on someone. That way you could get away with that, and your supervisors, your superiors wouldn't find out about it usually.
Yeah. Do you have any photographs of when you were in the service, or?
Well, photographs were pretty much prohibited on the ship. I made one voyage after the war, and I did take some pictures of that, and I do have some at home of the ship and of my friend that was on there, and we went to Germany, from New York City to Germany. And so I do have a few pictures from that era, and then of course I have my class photograph from radio training.
Yeah.
There were about 50 guys all grouped together in uniform.
Yeah.
Kind of
were you pretty good friends with some of the guys?
Oh yeah, sure. I had about 4, I would say, over the years, I had about 4 what I'd call close friends.
Yeah. Do you still keep in touch with any of them, or?
Well, I've tried to, but I know one of them has died. And one of the others, the fellow I was most close to, I guess, I lost touch with him, and I've tried and tried to find him, but I haven't been able to locate him.
Yeah.
And the other 2, I never was that close that we kept in frequent touch, but I am still in contact with one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember the day that your service ended, like was completely over, kind of thing?
Well, I don't know that I can say I remember the day, but I remember certainly within a few days. And because I was discharged from the last and final voyage in New York City, you know, in March of 1946. I remember that pretty clearly, and I headed home.
Yeah. How old were you when it ended?
At that time, I was 20.
So you just went home as soon as you were discharged?
Yes.
Yeah. How long had you been away from your family at that point?
Well, been a number of months. I think probably at least a year. I'd have to go back and try to figure out when I last crossed the country. Usually when I crossed from one coast to the other, I'd stop in Illinois, which is sort of in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly when I was home last. But I think it was the Christmas that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of visits home.
Yeah. What did you do in the days and weeks after you were discharged?
Well, I was so happy to be back that I immediately started helping my father, who was a farmer, get the spring crops ready. So I did a lot of plowing and that kind of thing. And then I went clothes shopping, finally bought some civilian clothes.
Yeah. And
then I signed up, registered for college and started school that fall.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Oh no, not at all. We didn't get any of the benefits that the GI Bill provided.
Why not?
Well, it's a long and somewhat complex story that even I now don't understand it. The president of the country, Roosevelt, Truman, who eventually became president, Eisenhower, Nimitz, MacArthur, every one of them were highly in favor of the Merchant Marine being included in the GI Bill. Roosevelt said so, specifically. But when he died, for some reason or other, there was resistance in the military, apparently, against it. Why, I can't imagine, but apparently there was, and they were able to sway enough political influence to prevent it. I didn't know that at the time, but of course the use of the Merchant Marine was, that's a story in and of itself. The military had no way of transporting personnel and material to Europe and to Asia. It all had to come from some force that we didn't even have when the war started. So somehow or other they originated the U.S. Maritime Commission, which in turn became responsible for sort of taking over the commercial shipping interests of the country and converting them to military use under the control of and administration of the government, federal government. Well, of course, they didn't have very many ships, so they had to build ships. Well, they built thousands during the war. And I was on one of those recently constructed ships. And they had no people to man the ships.
Yeah.
And for some reason, which I've never understood, they didn't want to use the people who were being conscripted into the military to do that. They wanted to use some other source of people. Well, that's where the Maritime Commission originated the U.S. Maritime Service, which was the training facility. And so all during the war, during the early part of the war, the fatality rate in the Merchant Marine was very high.
Yeah.
extremely high, so high that I've heard, and I can't vouch for the truth of this, but I've heard that they wanted to keep it a secret, otherwise nobody would
Yeah.
volunteer to do this. These
Yeah.
were all volunteers,
Uh-huh.
all of them. And we had people all the way up to practically 70 years of age and clear down to 16 years of age that were in that.
Yeah.
All of them volunteers.
Mhm.
So they didn't want it known how dangerous it was.
Uh-huh.
There were literally hundreds of ships being sunk in those early years of the war.
Uh-huh.
So that was, I've heard, one of the reasons why they didn't give it any publicity, in the sense that the military services got publicity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, big bulletin boards and so
Yeah.
forth of join the Army today.
Yeah, I've
this
seen
kind of
those.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that kind of thing. And maybe that's one reason. I don't know. Then, of course, later, I'm rambling, I guess, but later there was resistance from the military in that for some reason or other they thought that we were overpaid for what we were doing.
Uh-huh.
Which is kind of ridiculous, because that's been researched considerably, and that simply was not true.
Uh-huh.
By the time you add the military man's salary or pay and all the benefits that come with it, including the GI Bill, the pay is certainly no more than our pay was certainly no more than their pay.
Mm-hmm.
by no means, and the benefits that they reaped after the war were so much greater than anything we had. In fact, we didn't have any. There's very little comparison. And even now, after all these years, they're still trying to get some sort of compensation for those years, and I don't know if it ever happened or not.
Yeah.
So we didn't get any college or any insurance or any that kind of thing at all. Benefits for the families or anything like that.
So you paid for all of your schooling yourself, or your family? Or
Right.
how?
I worked my way through a good deal of college.
Yeah. What did you go to college for?
What did I go for?
Uh-huh. Like, what was your major?
Well, life sciences.
Uh-huh.
Originally, I intended to teach physiology. That's what I wanted to do, general physiology in some small college someplace.
Uh-huh.
That's what I had in mind originally.
Uh-huh.
And later, when I had a growing family in school, I decided that I couldn't afford that any longer.
Yeah.
I had to get a job, so I applied for a naval commission and the FBI at the same time.
Uh-huh.
And the FBI came through first.
Yeah.
So I spent the next 25 years in the FBI.
Yeah. 25 years in the FBI. Huh.
Yeah.
That's a good career in the FBI.
And then I retired and went into business for myself with
Uh-huh.
2 other retirees.
Uh-huh.
And we did that for the next 17 years after that.
What did you do? In
this retirement,
Uh-huh.
it was a corporate security organization.
Uh-huh.
We did, you might say, security research for corporations for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Where we'd review their entire situation in a big corporate facility of some sort, and then write a report suggesting what they can do to improve their security,
Oh, okay.
both communication-wise and physical-wise.
Okay. That's cool. When you were in the since you were in the military, did it influence how you think about how you think about war or
Oh, yeah.
military careers in general?
Yes. It I think, convinced me as a young person that the tragedy of war, which certainly is obvious to everyone, is necessary and justified when you have to defend your country to do it.
So are you in support of war?
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
from that point of view.
Yeah.
As long as it's a defensive action.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are there any reunions that you go to or went to?
Well, no, we have had some in the communications field of people who I could have gone, but I haven't gone to any of them.
Uh-huh.
I haven't.
Yeah. How did the service in general and the experiences that you had affect who you are?
Well, that's a tough question. I guess the experience that I had personally added to the experience that I later used in my work in the FBI in the technical end area. I think that's probably the biggest influence, was the training I received and used. Of course, it developed a lifelong interest in boating and everything connected with boating. And but that's from a recreational point of view.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't gone over or talked about yet?
Well, the only thing I would add would be to make the public in the country aware of the essential nature and contribution that the Merchant Marine makes to any defensive action.
Yeah.
The military would have been totally helpless and hopeless without what we were doing.
Yeah.
You know, we carried most of the men over there and back. We supplied them with everything that they used while they were there.
Yeah.
Almost with no exceptions. So they wouldn't have really have been able to even go.
Yeah, because you were basically like their lifeline.
Yeah, completely. And yet we got no recognition for it.
Yeah.
Hardly at all.
Because you brought them.
And we were all volunteers, and they were all, for the most part, draftees.
Yeah.
Not that that's any criticism of them, but that was nevertheless the case.
Yeah, because you basically brought them everything.
Yeah.
From
definitely.
Ammunition to food, supplies.
Everything, yeah. Including the ships, not the ships, all the ammunition, airplanes, tanks, amphibious vehicles, you name it.
Yeah.
Cannon, machine guns, and everything that goes with it.
Yeah. If one of the ships hadn't shown up, what would they have done?
Well, of course, I assume they had others coming all the time. It's constant flow. But the boss of the ships in the early part, see, 1 out of every 26 people in the Merchant Marine were killed.
Yeah.
So that's high. That's a higher casualty rate than any of the services. We had no people sitting around cooking food at a boot camp back in the States.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is almost everyone in the service was in the danger zone. Almost everybody.
Yeah.
There were, I suppose, some ships that did nothing but run. Well, even along the coastline of the United States, we had hundreds of ships sunk within sight of the beach.
Really?
Off the east coast of the United States. Oh yeah, you didn't have to be overseas to speak, so to speak, to be killed.
Yeah.
And many were killed.
Yeah.
The German submarine fleet concentrated on our shoreline, in effect, when they could. And sunk, I don't know the numbers, but a large number of shipping right off the coast. So almost, like I said, almost everybody that was on a Merchant Marine ship was in danger.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I certainly wasn't aware of the degree of danger when I enlisted.
Yeah.
Now, whether it would have made any difference, I don't know. I doubt that it would have, but I don't know whether it would have or not. And that's the reason, very likely the reason they didn't propagate that information.
Yeah, I mean, who would want to know that?
Yeah, right.
But I suppose if that's all that, unless you'd like to add anything else, would you like to add anything else?
No, I think that pretty well covers it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this concludes the interview then.
All right.
So thank you for
Well,
letting me interview you.
Thank you for being interested.
No problem. I am interested, and it was interesting to hear all that. So, but
Okay.
thank you for letting me do this.
You're welcome.